أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ثم جعلناك على شريعة من الأمر فاتبعها ولا تتبع أهواء الذين لا يعلمون إنهم لن يغنوا عنك من الله شيئا وإن الظالمين بعضهم أولياء بعض والله ولي المتقين هذا بصائر للناس وهدى ورحمة لقوم يوقنون آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On the 15th of August, so only 2 weeks ago, it was a very strange incident that gives us an insight into both the political circumstances in which we live in, but also the reality of the weaknesses of those in certain political positions. You may have heard of a young girl, 16 years old, by the name of Greta Thunberg. I think she is Swedish, and she is a champion for the causes to stop global warming and to help in the fight back towards environmental equilibrium. And what's interesting about her story is that she left school. She decided to leave school altogether at the age of 16, and she's been traveling around the world as an ambassador for this movement so that the world is more aware of this fight in bringing environmental justice, equilibrium back to the world. On the 15th of August, she departed the UK and went on a 2-week journey on a solar-powered boat across the pond from the UK to the United States of America. A solar-powered boat, which means there's zero carbon emissions from it, it's carbon neutral. And as she was departing, a man by the name of Aaron Banks wrote a tweet about her. I don't know if you know who Aaron Banks is, but just in case you don't, I'll just give a 10-second biography of this individual. His net worth is somewhere between 100 and 250 million pounds. It's $250 million. It's not chump change. And he was actually the political head and the financier of Leave campaign. You know, the Brexit campaign. He was the financier of Leave.eu, the campaign to leave the European Union, which of course eventually became a successful referendum vote. You know what he tweeted about Greta Thunberg and her voyage on a boat, a 16-year-old girl? He actually indicated towards wishing her harm. You know what he tweeted? He said it would be a great shame. It would be a great shame if a freak accident was to befall her. We're going to come back to this story as we do in the majlis later on. Our series, which we started last night, is entitled Islam in Britain and Britain in Islam 2020 to 2030. Last night, we started looking at certain questions around how we assume Islam to be, and also how we assume Islam not to be. We started with the story that in 2009, there was a debate in London between 4 individuals on the question, is the Catholic Church a source of good or not? And we unpacked this question and eventually asked, is Islam a source of good in the world today? Is Islam a source of good in Britain today? When we see all the social ills and spiritual challenges that exist, is the Islam that we conceive of and its infrastructure bringing about goodness within Britain such that it can actually bring about a change within the society? And we looked at certain assumptions that are made in the way in which we understand our Islam. And then we referred them back to the Quran to see whether we understand Islam today the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Islam within the Quran. So for example, we mentioned that one of the great Maraja al-Kiram, may Allah bless him, he writes in a book maybe 30 years ago, where he makes a statement which, although is true, but if you think through the statement itself is not complete. He says, for example, that مما اختص به الدين الإسلامي, what is specific, special about the religion of Islam, القدرة التي يستطيع بها أن يواكب البشرية إلى قيام الساعة. That Islam, what is special about it, is that it's able to keep up pace with humanity's changes until the end of time. Now this is true, isn't it? Wherever humanity goes, Islam is also able to keep up pace. The problem with that statement is what? That Islam was never meant to keep up pace with human change. Islam was always meant to lead human change. Islam was meant to lead growth of humanity, and humanity was supposed to follow Islam's changes, Islam's guidance. But if we root our thinking in the first, we will always be 1 or maybe 5 steps behind humanity. Therefore, although the statement is true, the way in which it leaves us to interpret our religion is always a religion that is playing second fiddle towards the rest of humanity. So then we stated, if you look at the way the Quran speaks about Islam, it speaks about Islam in a completely different light. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alif Lam Ra Kitabun Anzalnahu Ilayka Litukhrijan Nasa Minan Dhulumati Ilan Nur. That this book of Allah is supposed to lead people, take people out of darkness and into light. Is the Islam that we have today doing that for the world or Britain? To be honest with you, it is not. We mentioned that the Quran, for example, says, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ. That this Quran is supposed to guide people to what is most upstanding. Does the way in which we practice our religion institutionally, individually, lead people towards that which is aqwam or not? The Quran, for example, says that وَيَدَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. It's supposed to lift the burdens of society and break the shackles that are on people. Does the Islam that we have today do that? And so we stated yesterday in our introduction that the question that was posed to that debate is actually the wrong one. When we come to Islam, we don't just want to ask, is Islam a force for good? We assume it is. We know it is. Christianity, Judaism, our Sunni brethren, all of these are good for the world. The question I pose, is Islam a source of change and progress for the world? And we argued yesterday, actually it's not. And that's what our series is about. What are the challenges that exist in Britain? And how over the next decade can we have a visionary Islam which looks at these challenges and either responds reactively or sets out an agenda of change such that we're able to bring about a difference and make the rest of the country follow the ideals that Islam has. This is the discussion that we were having. Now, yesterday and every day we will set homework. Hands up who remembers what the homework was. Just not who's done it. Hands up who remembers what the homework was. It's about 11 of you. Yeah? So maybe that's 10%. It's not good enough, right? Now, who actually did the homework? MashaAllah. A star here, A star there. MashaAllah, A star there. Sayyid's not put up his hand. I'm going to give him a D minus. Yeah? Now, this brings me to a side point. Look, we're going to be talking at some level of depth. We want to have a good, honest discussion about these matters that impact our life. You can see that we've even brought a number of books to present you with tonight, like we talked about yesterday. Moral philosophers we mentioned, historians we mentioned. If you can bring a pen and pad to these majalis, then it will make a difference, because rather than 10% say, I remembered what the homework was, then at least maybe 50 or 80% can say. Now, if your children went to school without a pen and a pad, you would be embarrassed if their teacher asked why. But when we come to the majlis of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, we don't take it as seriously. This is not good enough. We're talking about making a change within society. We can't even bring a pen and a pad to the majlis. Can you see? We're talking at a level of bringing change, leading the world. Muslims can't even bring a pen and a pad to the majlis itself. Right? So if you want to write the notes on your phone, I trust you that you won't go onto Twitter and Facebook, unless it's to say good things about the majlis. But I expect maybe you put your phone on airplane mode. You do it when you're in the flight. I believe that you probably listen to the steward and stewardess. Therefore you can at least do it here. Our Imam, the sixth Imam Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, a wonderful hadith where he says, write. For if you do not write, you will not remember. Yeah? So don't take it from me. You and I want to follow the aqwal of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, so we do so inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
تفضل شيخنا. بسم الله تفضل. إجازة. Allah يحفظك. The homework was what? The homework that we asked for yesterday was, if you were debating in that debate, you know, the two public individuals, intellectuals that debated this topic against the idea that the Catholic Church is a source of good on this earth, were two very good debaters. There was Stephen Fry and there was Christopher Hitchens. Irrespective of whether you believe what they believe, you know that they can hold their own in an argument at least. They will present their argument. And to be honest with you, they crushed the two individuals who were representing the other side. As I said to you yesterday, I think they won by 80% or something. So I asked you in the homework, if you were going to argue, is Islam a source of good against these two individuals, how would you argue it? Prove it to me. Prove it to yourself that the way in which Islam is today is actually a source of good. We already agreed it's not a source of change. But how is it a source of good? And would you be able to defeat their responses? So let's mark some of these homeworks very quickly to think through this. How did you answer this question?
So the three major categories that they were pitching their argument was the past atrocities of Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So the examples. The second is the stubbornness of the hierarchy and the lack of acknowledging their past mistake.
Okay.
And number three, that the impact the church was doing on a common people.
Okay.
So whether they are serving people or they're going against
Right.
humanity-wise.
Correct.
Looking back at this one, when I thought it, it's actually quite frightening. Why it is quite frightening? Because we as a Muslim, first of all, don't have an institution or a representation that we can call it that this is what Islam is.
We don't have something called the church per se.
Or we don't have, like, we have scattered centers. So even with Shia Islam or Sunni Islam, so that was one issue. And I kept thinking, what will be my argument? And then I came across an excellent video by Alibet TV about Who is Hussein campaign in London. And the title of this presentation was Ashura by the eyes of non-Muslims in London.
Ashura, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam through the eyes of non-Muslims.
Non-Muslim, two individual case study style documentary, and the beauty of that was that it's very hard to fault the Hussein story and the impact he has on life.
So it's universal.
It's universal, and because it represents Shia Islam in a way, and Shia Muslim follow Hussein and do good things about Hussein. So I thought that, you cannot sell Islam or cannot sell the story of Islam based on what the Muslim nations are doing. You can perhaps make an argument using Hussein and Hussein's sacrifice and what Shia Muslim follow. That was my only defense. Because
now the point here is that it's a good exercise, isn't it? Because in the climate that we live in, we often do have to defend our Islam. We do have to engage in dialogue with people whose starting position is Islam is evil, Islam is brutal, Islam is backwards. Yes? So if you can see here, the challenge that you have is something that if you're able to think through for yourself, you might be in a better position tomorrow if you need to be able to demonstrate the arguments that Islam is a source of good on this earth. Now, something that Dr. Ali Shari'ati writes in one of his books, the book is just called Sociology. In his book on sociology, he says, look, you can judge, one of the ways you can judge a religion is by the very best people that it has managed to nurture. So the religion of Islam has managed to nurture Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. It's managed to nurture Jaffer Ladak alayhi salam. It's managed to nurture Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. And. Look at these individuals that have come from the boon of Islam, that has suckled at the teat of the knowledge of Islam. If that is the emblem of what Islam can produce, then you can see whether it is good or not, whether it is a force for good or not. So these are arguments that we can take, and this was the homework that was set last night. Now, where we stopped last night was that we asked this question about Islam being a source of goodness and a source of change within society. And in order for us to know how it can change society, we need to be able to do two things. The first thing we need to be able to do is understand how we can identify the challenges that exist within your society, and then we have to go and look at how the Holy Prophet of Islam himself dealt with the challenges of his time and was able to change the society from what it was to what it became. So that's what we're going to do tonight, inshallah. Now, in regards to the second question of how the Prophet changed his society, this is a whole subject in and of itself. And we don't have time to go into it in its depth because our subject is Britain and changing Britain. But what we will always be doing throughout the series is referring back to the Prophet and the way in which he dealt with the same situations in his time and use it as an archetype to be able to understand how we might make a positive effect on our own society today. Now, let's have a look at what the Quran says about the type of society that the Prophet came to and how he left it, and some of the broad challenges that existed within the time of the Prophet. And then we will move on to try to think about how the Prophet analyzed his society. Why? Because if you and I understand how the Prophet analyzed the society that he lived in, you and I will be in a better position to understand how to analyze our own society that we live in, meaning Britain in 2019, 2020. The Quran, at one point, lambasts the people of Arabia, and at another point, praises them and lauds them to no end. How strange. Is this a contradiction? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about a group of people at one point and then speaking about them again at another point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Arab community, the Bedouin polytheistic Arab society, at the time of the mission of the Prophet. For example, in chapter number 15, Surah Al-Hijr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following: لَعَمْرُكَ إِنَّهُمْ لَفِي سَكْرَتِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. I take an oath by your existence, Ya Rasulullah. I swear by your life, Ya Rasulullah, most surely these people are wandering blindly in their intoxications. Now it doesn't mean literally intoxications. Yes, they were drunkards in that society, but it means that the way in which they were living was like they were drunk. What happens, na'udhu billah, when someone is drunk? They cannot see straight. They cannot think straight. They cannot think for themselves. They're not in control of what they do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making an example here. These people are wandering blindly in the way in which they live. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Imran has another verse. This time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises this society and He lauds them. And He says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best of people that have been heralded for mankind. SubhanAllah. What we mean here is that within only a presence of the Prophet for a few years, the Prophet took them from down here to up here by his presence. The Islam that they had liberated them from the practices, the darknesses that they were living in, took them out of it and into light, such that Allah could praise them to such an end. Can you imagine that level of Islam? They were so morally bereft. What were they doing? They used to bury their newborn daughters alive. They used to go to war with each other constantly over the most petty of issues. They would follow their tribal leaders irrespective of what they would tell them. They used to worship sticks and stones, considering it to be their gods. You know, the Quran talks about this in depth, the kind of lives that they were living. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions within the Quran, twice He has a verse where He says, لَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Do not eat up your wealth amongst each other in falsities. Our sixth Imam Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, the hadith where he comments upon these two ayahs, and he says, you know what the men of Arabia used to do? Listen to this. Understand what they were like. You know what they used to do? When they used to gamble, when they lost a gambling debt, instead of paying off their debt by selling off their wealth, selling off their camels or their horses and paying off their debts, they used to sell their own family members into prostitution and slavery. Their wives. This is what the men were like. You know what they used to do when they worshipped their sticks and stones and idols? They literally used to worship clumps of clay and dates, food, dates, khujur, clumped together and worship it as an idol. Can you imagine what is going on in here? Just think about it for a second. What level of aql needs to be shackled for you to imagine that something you have created with your own hands, nay, something you eat when you go hungry, is your God? This is what they were doing. You'll remember that story of the great companion Abu Dharr Ghifari. May Allah elevate his station. I think he's the fourth convert in the history of Islam, or something to that effect. You know, he used to be a highway robber before his conversion to Islam. The narration, his biography says that one day he was preparing to go on a mission to rob a caravan, and he was sitting, and in front of him was his God, and he was praying to his God for a successful mission. A fox came and urinated on his idol. At that moment the penny dropped. He said, if the idol cannot protect itself, how is it going to protect me? It's so obvious. But these people were living in this state which was so morally bereft, so shackling of their thinking, that they could not see anything beyond it. Now, I don't have time to go into too much depth as to what this society was like, but there are so many narrations and verses which you probably already know of. Piece it together and think about the ways in which these people were living together as a society. As the Quran said, إِنَّهُمْ لَفِي سَكْرَتِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. These people are wandering blindly in their intoxications. Now, after only a few years, Allah says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best of people that have been heralded for mankind. This shows us how productive their Islam was. This shows us how liberating their Islam was. This shows us how their Islam was a force for good and change in the civilization that they came to. I ask that question again. Is the Islam that we practice either at an individual level, or at a familial level, or at the communal level, or at the national level, or at the global level, does it bring people out of darkness and into light? Or does the Islam that we practice actually shackle us and make us even worse? Just think about this. So these are the questions that we need to ask about the society that the Prophet came to. And then we need to think about how the Prophet thought through these challenges and reflected on these challenges before he began his mission. Now, here is something really profound. And one of the great scholars of our time, Ayatollah Sheikh Jaffer Subhani, may Allah grant him a long life, a giant of an author, has written an important book that I recommend everybody take time out to read. It's available in English and it's a good translation. You know, sometimes you get these translations and you look at the original and then you look at the translation and some of it's here and there, and this translation is very good. The book is called The Message by Sheikh Jaffer Subhani. It is a biography of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And in it he writes something really profound that needs to be understood. So our question is, how do you understand the challenges of your society? And we need to see how the Prophet did this as well. Sheikh Subhani writes something that I've not seen in any other biography of the Prophet, from any other scholar. This is completely unique to Sheikh Subhani, or at least in my limited research it is. He says the following: the Prophet is on Ghar Hira. We all know what Ghar Hira is, yes? Yes? It's that cave, this cave on the mountaintop, which is overlooking Mecca, correct? Hands up, how many people have been to Ghar Hira here? Yeah? Alhamdulillah, good number. May Allah take you all every year, inshaAllah. If you go for Umrah or Hajj, try to go up. What happened in Ghar Hira? Ahsant, Wahi. What came? The Quran came on the night of Qadr. So the Prophet used to spend hours there, correct? You will remember famously that Lady Khadija alayhi salam used to go up and down twice a day to provide food for the Prophet when he used to retreat to Ghar Hira for his servitude. Now, Sheikh Subhani writes a question in his book. He says, what was the Prophet doing up there on Ghar Hira? Most of us, we would answer very simply, he was worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Correct? No doubt. The Prophet, of course, was worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, Sheikh Subhani makes a second point, and this is the profundity that he comes out with his pen. He says the Prophet wasn't just worshipping. He was reflecting on his society, what they were like. Because when he began his mission, he needed to have understood the society so well that he was able to accomplish his mission. this changes the way in which we understand the Prophet altogether, isn't it? You see, most of us, we consider the Prophet to be very robotic. Why? Because he's ma'soom. So when he comes, he just comes and he brings everyone out of darkness into light. It doesn't work like that. He is a human being that has to come to other human beings. Some human beings have hang-ups. Some human beings have difficult personalities. Some are looking for truth. Some need to be a little bit woken up and shaken. It is a real society that the Prophet came to, the same as if he came to any other society today. Sheikh Subhani says, the Prophet had to go and reflect deeply on his society. Now there's an image that's very beautiful. Think about this. If you've been to Ghar Hira, or you know Makkah today, you know there's that monstrosity, right? This big clock tower, the Sa'a, devilish creation of other devils. Now, today if you were going there, you would see Makkah, wouldn't you? You would see the Haram, the Kaaba, you would see the lights, from this society lit up in the 20th century. You would see this giant clock tower. Imagine what the Prophet for a minute was looking at, right? He's looking down and he's seeing this town. And this town is built by the hands of his grandfather Ibrahim alayhi salam. And this town has developed with tatawurat and evolution from generation after generation, century after century, and it's reached this point that even though it has been built by the hands of the man who is the master and founder of all monotheism, they still have 365 idols inside the Kaaba. You see how the city has changed. Nay, not only is this a city built in the hands of the father of all monotheism, the father of all Abrahamic faiths, not only this, but the very people that he's going to come to and give them the privilege of understanding Tawheed properly, they're going to deny that Tawheed was ever within this city. You know what the Quran says? That the Prophet used to come to the Meccan people and they actually used to respond by saying, this idea of monotheism, we've never even heard of it. The Quran talks about this in Surah Sad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes them and says that, does he make all of our gods into one God? Inna hada la shay'un ajab. What a strange thing this is. They're living in the city of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and they are denying that monotheism has existed in the city of Ibrahim. أَجَعَلَ آلِهَةَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عَجَابٌ. What a strange thing this Muhammad brings to us, monotheism. The Prophet had to understand the types of people that he was coming to, how they would react, who is going to be on his side, who is going to be against him, why are these people going to accept him, and why are those people going to reject him, in order to be able to deal with the people that he was going to come to. Now just think about this very quickly. I'm going to go through this very quickly so you and I to be able to understand some of these issues. Now, if you imagine the way in which women were treated, we mentioned, correct? For example, if you were born a girl, you would be buried alive. And then if you happened to survive that, you would not be educated, you had no rights whatsoever. And then you would be married off at the age of 6 or 8 or 9. And then you would be there for the pleasure of your husband, and you would just be there to produce children and nothing more. And then if your husband lost a gambling debt, he would actually sell you off into slavery to pay off his gambling debts. This was the life of a woman, and nothing more. Now the Quran came, and the Prophet came, and he knocked at all of these things, didn't he? Verse after verse after verse stopped this, and not only stopped this, but evolved the situation of women the way in which they were there. Right? For example, the Quran mentions that on the Day of Judgment, the girls that have been buried alive will have the right to ask, بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. For what reason was I buried? Or for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes to the root causes of why they used to bury their girls alive. One verse says that their faces used to turn black in anger at having been born a girl. The Prophet responded and said that if you have daughters, you are guaranteed Jannah. They used to say, how are we going to have any rizq to be able to look after these girls? At least the boys, they go out and earn their rizq. The girls don't earn any rizq. Allah responded with a verse. He said, نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ لَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةً إِمْلَاقٍ نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ. Don't kill your children out of a fear of poverty. We gave you rizq, we will give them rizq. Then the Prophet not only stopped all of this, he changed the situation and he gave hadith after hadith after hadith about the station of a woman. For example, he would say, someone came to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, after Allah, whom should I love? Whom should I respect most? He said, your mother. Then whom? Your mother. Then whom? Your mother. And then he said, Jannah sits under the feet of your mother. And then he said, the best of men are those who are best towards their wives. Not only was he bringing goodness, he changed the entirety of the situation. Now, simple question, and if you answer this question right, you will understand exactly how the Prophet worked. If you were a woman at that time, and you heard all of these ayat, and you heard all of these ahadith of a man claiming to be the Prophet of God, if you were a woman, would you retain your polytheism or would you immediately cling towards Islam? You would convert immediately, wouldn't you? So the women of Arabia in droves would have gone towards Islam, correct or not? If you were a slave or a black individual that was considered fourth class in society, and the Prophet said, there is no difference between black and white, between Arab and non-Arab. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That the best of you are those who actually have the most God consciousness. Would you not flock towards Islam? Yes. If you were the poor and Islam came and said, redistribute your wealth amongst people equitably, wouldn't you flock towards Islam? Yes. Every class, every group of society had something that would change their life. Not just goodness. It brought them out of a state of weakness into strength, darkness into light, misguidance into guidance. Everyone had something that they could cling and hold on to for Islam. Nay, they were willing to die for that religion. And you see that. When the Prophet was sitting on Rahila, he wasn't just worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was pondering and understanding his community and how to bring them a message that they would love, that they would cherish, that could be something that was going to be instrumental within the life that they had. Now, let's take this a step further and start thinking about it in terms of the time in which we live in as well. And remember, all we're doing is just talking about principles, and then we go into the specifics in our series. Our scholars tell us that there are 5 big questions of this universe. There are many small questions that you can ask, and most people end up getting lost on the small bit. Number 1. Number 2, you would ask, where do I get my knowledge from? What's true and false in this world, and how do I figure out what is true and what is false? We talked about this yesterday, the epistemology that comes from people. Another question that you would ask is, who am I? Right? An identity-based question. 4th question that you would ask is, what is my purpose in existence? And then you would ask the 5th question, where am I going? Now look at these questions and look at what Sheikh Subhani said. That the Prophet was doing 2 things. He was worshipping and he was questioning and pondering about his own society. Now it tells us here about some of these questions. Things like, who am I? What am I doing on this planet? What's my purpose in this planet? In this existence within this vast universe? And you can see how often people get bogged down in very minor questions or get thrown off course before they've even answered some of these questions. Now I want to mention some of the points that the Quran states and think about some of the greater challenges that we have in our own society. So it just gives us a lead into tomorrow's lecture, inshallah. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran has a number of verses which talks about the purposes of life. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ I did not create the jinn and the ins except for servitude or worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I created you and I want to see whom amongst you أَيَّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا Whom amongst you is the best in the quality of deeds. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions in Surah Hud, chapter number 11 of the Quran, a verse that's very important that we can actually spend a lot of time reflecting on, that is particular to our series that we are going through in this particular number of nights. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Hud, chapter number 11, verse number 61. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Huwa ansha'akum min al-ardh. He is the one who created you, spread you from the earth. وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا. And He is the one, He has cultivated for you therein. This is important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about a purpose of society here. This isti'marat, this cultivation of the world that we live in. This is a purpose of society. When you and I cultivate something, what happens? We build it, we make it better, we change it, we evolve it such that it grows from one stage to another. If you cultivate the ground, the land, you know that you have to plant the seeds, you put the water, you need the sunshine, and then what will come from it will the produce be for you to take from it. This is one of the statements that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us as the purpose, that we are supposed to build society. We're supposed to build political institutions. We are supposed to build our communities. There's never a time of stagnation. Now, think about this in regards to the Prophet and then some of the challenges that we can see in our own time. Did the Prophet do everything at once? No. There was 23 years, correct? Not only that, there was Mecca and there was Medina. And there were specific challenges in Mecca and there were specific challenges in Medina, which we don't have time to go into tonight, but we'll go through it. Now, think about some of these points. I want to talk at the general level, but you'll understand the principles of what I wish to be able to mention to you. If you notice the Quran, sometimes the Quran shows the development of people in different ways. Take, for example, the verses of the Quran which talks about the prohibition of alcohol. How many verses are there? 3. First one will say, alcohol is bad. Second one says, don't come to salah whilst you're in the state of intoxication. And then the third one outlaws it altogether. Correct? This is well known, isn't it? Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just tell people, alcohol is bad, you can't have it anymore? Why not?
It would have been too radical.
Ahsant. It's a beautiful word. I used this word last night in the conclusion of my lecture. The Prophet was radical. The statement is correct. It would have been too radical. What do you mean by that?
By lowering straight away.
What would it have done? It would have pushed them, they would have reacted negatively to it, correct? Right? There's an amazing hadith, Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. I just want you to understand these are principles. Take the hadith but understand the principles of what I'm telling you, yeah? Look at how the Prophet dealt with this issue, yeah? two different stories on the same issue of alcohol consumption in the Arabian community. As you rightly said, it would have been too radical, they would have reacted negatively if it was all done at once. Right? First hadith, as an example. Someone came to the Prophet, a new convert. Yeah? Brand new convert, came inside the masjid of the Prophet. Masjid of the Prophet. He came with his servant, and he came with a bottle of wine. He comes and sits down with the Prophet. Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah. I've just converted to Islam, thank you. Here is this bottle of wine as a gift for you. Now, imagine if someone came in here to the Husayniyah doing the same thing. We're so hard-hearted, we can't even bear a different form of Shi'ism in our own centers. Someone comes with a different culture, someone comes with a different idea, we immediately ban them. We immediately push them away. Look how broad-chested the Prophet was in order to bring about a change in his society. They said, we brought you a gift of wine. The Prophet said, don't you know that Allah has forbidden wine? He said, no, I didn't. He turns towards his servant and whispers something in his ear. Rasulullah said, what did you whisper in his ear? He said, I told him to go and sell the alcohol. Is that allowed? No. Rasulullah says, don't you know the one who prohibited the alcohol has also made its sale to be haram? He goes and whispers in the ear again of his servant. Rasulullah says, what did you say to him? He says, I told him to go and throw it out, pour it out. And you see how soft-hearted he was with this individual. Another example of dealing with this, the Prophet, someone comes to him and says, Ya Rasulullah, I can't stop drinking alcohol. This is after the last prohibition, the third one. He says, I just can't stop. I'm an alcoholic. You know what? I drink it in secret. I get drunk. I don't come out of my house until I'm ready. I just can't stop. Help me. Prophet says to him, give up alcohol for me. He says, I can't. He says, give up alcohol for me. He says, I can't. Prophet says, fine. Will you give up something else for me in exchange? He said, anything you want, Ya Rasulullah. You name it, labbaika Ya Rasulullah. To that extent, you know. I'm here at your service. He says, give up lying for me. He says, no problem. He says, no, give up lying for me. You're going to do it? He says, yes, I'll do it. Next day, the companion comes back and sits with the Prophet. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I've given up alcohol. What happened? Rasulullah understood the people that he was coming to. Yeah, this is the topic. Understanding the people that he was coming to. This companion used to sit with other companions. And each of the companions, because they had so much love for Islam, they would talk about what they did during the day. One companion I would go with Rasulullah on an expedition, we'd go to this tribe and we'd try to convert them. The other one saying, I would build the masjid of the Prophet, I would put bricks in place. The other companion saying, I did this, I did this, I did this. What did you do? He felt embarrassed to tell his friends he was in his house drinking. He couldn't do it. He couldn't tell his friends who were lauding themselves. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm giving up alcohol out of embarrassment of the way in which I am. Can you see how the Prophet understood his society? 3 verses to be able to deal with the prohibition of alcohol. Yet, on the other side, you will see something so phenomenal. You will also remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the fasting that takes place in Shahr Ramadan. Initially, when fasting was made wajib on the early Muslims, they were not allowed to approach their wives even at night, correct or not? But so many of the men were so weak and unable to do this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed the entire hukum for them and said, you're so weak, I understand your weaknesses, you will be allowed to approach your wives at night. At one moment, there was empowerment in accordance with the state in which they lived in. At another moment, there was a pure understanding of the weaknesses that they had within them. The Prophet understood his society, and the Quran reflected that society and the movement of the society and helped them push themselves forward in a state of goodness for their society. In Nahj Balagha, letter number 31, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi writes to his son, he says, "O my son, I have walked in the ruins of the past nations, and I have pondered upon their lives so long and so hard that it is as if I have lived with them." Allahu Akbar. Just imagine, we think of these grand individuals as just being ma'soomeen, and so they don't need to live in the real world. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that the Prophet said, "Ana basharun mithlakum, huwa yamshi fil aswaq wa yut'imu at-ta'am." He's a human being like us. There has to be a movement of thought. There has to be an understanding of the challenges that exist. Now, I'm going to finish by returning back to the opening story that I gave you about Greta Thunberg. Do you remember the story I mentioned? I'm going to show you some of these books and a quote for you to help you to understand some of these things about Islam, and then we'll conclude with the Ghar. Greta, the 16-year-old girl, 16. She's left school permanently for the purpose of going around the world to champion the fight against global warming and climate change, man-made climate change. She's on a small boat, and she's going from the coast of Britain to the coast of the United States of America. A man by the name of Aaron Banks, who is worth $250 million, and has so much political influence that he is the one who actually issued the Leave.eu campaign. He is big enough to be able to change the entire politics of 4 countries of irreparable damage. This is the power that he has. But he's also so weak that he's able to make a threat to a 16-year-old girl and a tweet that says, "I hope no freak accident befalls her." Think about this deeply, deeply. What does it tell you? You know what it tells me? It tells me how insecure he is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions certain verses in the Quran. He says, indeed, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Yeah, mankind is weak. But you know what he says is weaker? إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. That the plan of Satan is also weak. You see, in the first verse, he's talking about human beings' physical weakness. Right? خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. We're physically weak. That's what he's referring to, right? In Dua Kumail, we say, قَوِّ عَلَى خِدْمَتِكَ جَوَارِهِ وَاشْتُرْ عَلَى الْعَزِيمَةِ جَوَانِهِ وَحَبِّرِ الْجِدَّ فِي خَشْيَتِكَ. We realize that there's 2 types of strength that we need. There's a strength in the limbs for our service, the physical service, and then there's also the internal strength that we need. On the other hand, Allah says, إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. That the plan of Satan is weak. This is not talking about the physical strength or the physical weakness. The plan of Satan is so weak. And then he says, those people who take awliya min dunillah, they are like the spider. The spider weaves this web for itself. Inna awhana, the most weak of the bayut is bayut al-ankabut. Law kanu يَعْلَمُونَ, if only they knew. When a man of that age and power has to make a threat to a 16-year-old girl, you know what it tells me? That he has concocted for himself nothing more than a house like a spider's web. You just need to flick it and it will crumble. All you need to do is flick it with truth and it will crumble. And when I see the world and I see the challenges that Britain has, people think that they have so much power that 1 minute, literally one day, they can say, Allah yarhamah, they will literally say, we will not allow democracy to be taken away from the people. And then the next day, they will literally turn around and take democracy away from the people by proroguing the parliament. These are the people that literally are on tape, 2 months ago, in the Tory party leadership debate, and they were all asked, will you stop democracy for a period of time in order to push through your plan? Do you know each and every one of them on that debate stage said no. 2 months later, they're either doing it or backing doing it, justifying doing it. Jacob Rees-Mogg, you know what he said? You know what Moggy said? I heard this a couple of days ago. You know what Moggy said? This was his argument. This is how he justified it. He goes, but, in September, instead of there being a break, they can come back and have their time. In October and November, they can have extra time. You're not understanding the point. We're not talking about what you're going to give them extra days in November. By then, it will have already gone through. These people are weak because they have created for themselves a web of lies. And if you understand this, I want to be able to just conclude and show you some of these points about the way in which we can build our understanding of the challenges that exist within the world today. So I brought with me a few books, and I'm going to quote just one passage and then show you and then conclude, inshallah. So this book is an important book by the former Archbishop of Canterbury by the name of Rowan, or Dr. Rowan Williams. Giant of a thinker, Faith in the Public Square. And I just want to read you one paragraph of what he says and think about the challenges that exist in the society today. And then I'm going to give you your homework. He says the following. The primary task and function of religious utterance is to describe authoritatively existence and to resolve the problems of existence. What did I say? Is Islam a source of good and change? What does he say? That religion is supposed to be that which resolves the problems. He says secularism fails to sustain the imaginative life of dealing with life's problems. So eventually it will fail. But its failure does not necessarily produce fascination with the spiritual. What happens is that eventually people turn towards other things, consumerism. They come towards new age spirituality, like yoga, saying this is spirituality, to solve their problems within their life. Where is the religion of Islam to help those people that realize that these people are there and are failing them? One challenge that exists within the society. Another book, I mentioned it yesterday because it was part of the title that we were giving to this series, Islam in Britain and Britain in Islam. And you can see this author, Joseph Massad, talks about Islam in liberalism. And he says the following, and this is very important because we'll be dealing with this topic a lot over the next coming nights. He says, Islam, the word Islam, is being created as opposed to certain antonyms. What's an antonym? What's a synonym? What's a synonym? Something which is similar to the word. What's an antonym? It's the opposite. So he says today, liberalism, in order to defeat Islam, has to make Islam have certain antonyms. certain words that when you hear Islam, you immediately think X, Y, and Z is its opposite. He says, in this way, Islam is being opposed to certain antonyms. Islam is opposed to Christianity. Islam is opposed to the West. Islam is opposed to liberalism. Islam is opposed to individualism, democracy, freedom, citizenship, secularism, rationality, tolerance, human rights, women's rights, sexual rights. And whenever you think of Islam, it is being identified with certain synonyms: oppression, repression, despotism, totalitarianism, subjection, injustice, intolerance, irrationality, cruelty, misogyny, and homophobia. Correct or not? If you were sitting with the Prophet on Ghar Hira, or if you were on the London Eye, and you were kind of at the top of the London Eye looking down, do you see the reflection that you need to give on understanding the challenges of your society and how you might think through some of these things? Now, I brought with me some of these books that help in understanding some of these challenges, and we're going to be using them to go through things. I just want to mention them. Environment of Hate, the New Normal for Muslims in the UK, a review of what's happening to Muslims in the UK. Only Canadian, the experience of hatred, moderated, differential citizenship for Muslims. What's happening to Muslims in Canada? France and the Hated Society, Muslim experiences. What's happening to Muslims in France? The state of media reporting on Islam and Muslims by the MCV. Counter-Islamophobia kit. How do we deal with counter-Islamophobia? You see, there is so much understanding out there and work to help us to understand our own society, but it requires us to take it seriously. That if we want to make Islam a genuine source of change in the society, the priority is to reflect on the challenges that exist, and then we're in a position to be able to understand how Islam can actually bring about a change. The homework for tonight is simple. Reflect on the society of Britain now. What would you consider to be the top 5 challenges that exist in the society? Top 5 challenges, and give them a hierarchy. Give them an order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because tomorrow night we will start by talking about how the Prophet understood the hierarchy of challenges, and he started with the hierarchy of challenges. And then inshallah we'll be in a position to understand how we can do so for the Britain that we are trying to bring change to as well. The Prophet changed the society such that the way in which they looked at women yesterday was to be one whereby they would see women as nothing more than a piece of meat, something is controllable, no dignity and honor. By the time the Prophet left them, they understood the way in which the value of the human soul was, and particularly how a woman brings change in society. Not all. Those people who retained that jahiliyyah in them were those that attacked the house of Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha. When the door fell on Fatima al-Zahra and the nail pierced her chest, and she calls out, "Fidda, come to my aid." We hear a narration, maybe a narration or something that the ulama mentioned, that says that one day Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam is at home and he's sitting in the corner of the house crying. Amir al-Mu'mineen comes home and sits down beside his blessed young son and begins to hold him, begins to console him. He says, "Oh my son Hassan, why are you crying so uncontrollably?" He looks up in the eyes of his father. He says, "Father, if you had to see what I saw on that day when they attacked the house of my mother, you would also be crying the way in which I am crying as well." In the last hours of Lady Fatima's life, she is lying on that deathbed and her children have to come to her. There is a special relationship between Fatima al-Zahra and Husayn ibn Ali, because Fatima alayhi salam knows what is going to happen to her son. We are told that in those last hours, that even maybe after her passing, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam is holding on and clinging towards his mother. This is how much love Husayn ibn Ali had for his mother. We are told by the Dhakireen that at this moment that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is told to take Husayn off from the chest of Fatima. The Dhakireen say that Amir al-Mu'mineen was asking to take Husayn off. They asked, why should we take Husayn off from the chest of his mother? The response comes that the angels, they cannot bear this scene. The heartbreak of the angels, they cannot bear this scene of Husayn ibn Ali weeping over the martyrdom of his mother. They normally say that if this is how the angels felt when they saw Husayn ibn Ali with his mother, how is it that they were on the 10th of Muharram when they had to see this situation? After this comes the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen is lying on his deathbed. The poison is running through his veins. The narration says that there is so much poison that Amir al-Mu'mineen is shifting his legs in pain, in discomfort. He is unable to lie in a place in which he is still. The narration says that when he is struck on his blessed forehead by Ibn Muljim, Lady Kulthum comes running and says, "O Ibn Muljim, O criminal before Allah, you have done no harm to my father." At this point Ibn Muljim says, "I swear by Allah, I doused this sword in so much poison that if I was to strike 1,000 men, it would dispatch them all." This is why Ali ibn Abi Talib, his legs are shaking and quivering in pain. It says that there is so much poison, pus is coming out of his forehead, so much that even the bandage does not cover it. At this moment, in the last hours of Amir al-Mu'mineen's life, the narration says that he gives his final wasiyah and will towards his family. He calls Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam over. He places the hand of every one of the family members into the hand of Imam al-Hassan, except Abu Fadl al-Abbas. Abbas turns towards his father and says, "Oh father, am I not from you as well? Is it not that my hand is supposed to be loyal in the hand of Imam al-Hassan?" The narrations and those who tell us, the Dhakireen say that at this moment that Abu Fadl Abbas is told by his father, "Your hand goes into the hands of Hussein, for your purpose of birth was there to defend Abu Abdullah al-Hussein." We are told that at this moment Amir al-Mu'mineen narrates the tragedy of what is going to happen. There is a maqtal that mentions that when Abu Fadl Abbas is about to depart the tent from the last time, at this moment Sayyidah Zainab comes out and she says, "Oh Abbas, I never believed this day would come. Do you remember what our father told us in his last hours?" He says, "Tell us, remind me, oh my sister." She says, "Oh Abbas, my father told us in these last hours of his life that there would come a day in which I, Zainab, would be in chains. I, Zainab, would be paraded from city to city. I, Zainab, they would try to sell me off as a slave in the marketplaces. I never imagined how that day would come so long as you, Abbas, were alive to protect me. But now I see you departing from the tents, and I know that you are never to return. I know this moment has come. My destiny is now before me." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we're to pass away from this world before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.